Hi, this is Brooke Medicine Eagle, here with Returning to Earth, Becoming Fully Human. This is a dynamic forum of wisdom keepers, teachers, healers, elders, who all have their focus on offering you real, sustainable, grounded, empowering solutions to the challenges that we face individually and as a planetary human family. So I'm very thrilled today to welcome an old and dear, dear friend of mine, Holly Blue Hawkins. She brings an eclectic array of knowledge to support her clients personally, authentic, spiritually, and environmentally sustainable end of life choices. Her extensive background as an experienced successor trustee for a $1 million family trust, an estate planning paralegal, and notary public, 20 years of service in a Jewish burial society, and training as a soul memory discovery facilitator makes her uniquely qualified as a guide in the vast territory of a life that includes dying. Holly Blue has taught end-of-life planning in community college extensions and congregational settings, spoken at international conferences on both secular and religious communities. She's a recommended speaker for the Green Burial Council. And basically, Holly's life is dedicated to protecting the sacredness of the life-death passage. Holly, welcome. You know, when I spoke to you the other day and you started just telling me a little bit about your work, I was just stunned with my own ignorance and what I didn't know and what is clear to me that most of us don't know about this process and about the beauty that's possible with this. So I'd love to just hear from you a little bit about your background with it, and then just the kind of things you think will really help our folks out and that I know you're passionate about.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Brooke, and thank you so much for including me in this amazing conversation, I will say, that goes on for weeks and weeks. And I'm very glad that there's only one of these a day, because it takes me the rest of the day to chew the cud, so to speak, of this amazing feast of knowledge and perspectives and ideas. And you know, as I was preparing for this, I was reminiscing, you know, times and things that we've done together, and realizing what a profound influence you've been on my life and my values and how I've ended up where I've ended up.
Mm.
And when I listened to Sandra Ingerman, I was really touched, and especially thinking back, there was a time that I spent quite a bit of time learning from her as well. And you know, I read a lot of poetry at some times in my life, and there was one that came out of the time that we were learning about soul retrieval together. And there was a day that we were focusing on doing soul retrieval, not for human beings, but for the land itself.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a poem that came out of that I really want to open with, because I feel like it sort of lays the ground for what I'd like to talk with you about in this time. And the poem is called "Sing Back to the Soul of the Land." Sing to the land, mothering songs, songs of celebration. With your eyes, embrace the land. With your hands, set to right what has been cast apart. With your hands, carry away what does not belong to the land. Sing love songs, magnificats, lamentations, celebrations, lullabies, with your heart and your voice and your whole being. Sing back the soul of the land.
Ooh, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
And I feel like that's what we're doing in this time, is really, you know, it's time for us to clean up this place, this amazing place where I have the privilege of living. Um, it's a place that you can tell that civilization has been living here for probably at least 100 years. There are elderly apple trees that were obviously very well pruned in their younger years, and they're so old now that just carrying a few apples in one branch will be enough to cause that branch to just break. She'll go, here's my last apple, as that branch falls to the ground. So this place has been lived in for a long time, and in a lot of ways that's really beautiful, and in other ways we'll find, like old bottles or, plumbing that brought water from the spring up to the water tank up above that used to feed this house and so on. And I just feel so compelled whenever I find anything that doesn't belong here to clean it up. And at the same time to say, okay, that branch that just fell is full of life. It looks like a dead branch that's rotting, but what lives in that rotten branch, or all the critters that are living in that snag tree that's standing up, they're all nourishing and bringing life and bringing energy and feeding the earth. And that's what I realize we have the opportunity to do with our bodies when we die. And so I want to loop back around to that as we have this time together. But I want to tell a little backstory first. So I went from that time, studying about soul retrieval and a lot of different shamanic traditions and so on, to saying to myself, getting a little practical, and this sounds kind of funny. I'm about to turn 70. I was in my mid 40s then. And I said to myself, you're getting a little bit old to be climbing around on roofs and lava leaping and doing all these dangerous things. And you should get yourself a safer job. And I took a job working for a nonprofit organization and spending a lot of time in front of a computer. And it only took about a year for a computer mouse to take me out. I got one of those cumulative motion injuries, and I literally was totally disabled for a year. I couldn't even sign my name without crying. I was in so much pain. And I was in a lot of psychic pain at the same time that was going on, as you can well imagine. But an interesting thing happened. I had this group of friends. So in the Jewish tradition, we have an organization that's called the Chevra Kadisha, and that means holy society. I like to say holy friends, sacred society. And what our dedication is praying over and washing and really loving the bodies of our beloved dead before we return them to the earth. And a group of my friends were starting one of these organizations, and I was really bummed out to see this going on because I couldn't get involved because I couldn't do anything until I found out that part of the dedication of that sacred society is sitting with and praying over the dead. And that was about the only thing I could do. So I started sitting with these bodies of, and these were like friends and parents of friends, and God forbid sometimes children, but just sitting with the body of someone who had died before they were buried. And it was this profound experience for me. It was so deep and so real and so up close and personal because I knew these people.
Yeah.
That one of the things that really showed me I was coming along and getting my full physical capacity back was that I said, I want to do this ceremony also where we, whatever garments they were wearing when they passed, we removed those and we give them like a sponge bath that you would like for somebody who is bedridden. We give them that sort of a bath. And then we do a ritual pouring of water in a continuous flow where we're saying, you know, the soul of this person is pure, and then we dress them in very simple but the traditional ceremonial garments that a high priest would wear, and lay them in a casket and pray over them, give them the priestly blessing. It's this really exquisite ceremony that we perform. And so I've been doing that for 20 years now. And again, these are very often either people who I have known personally or people who are relatives. Sometimes they're people I don't know at all. And that's also a very profound thing. Burying someone you've never met, but being there, you know, shoveling dirt into their grave because somebody needs to do that, and realizing how we're all connected is this incredibly powerful experience. And we say an interesting thing in Hebrew as we're doing this ritual pouring of water and proclaiming that the soul of this person is pure. We're saying tahara he, tahar meaning pure, and he meaning she. And we're saying that over and over again as we're doing this continuous pour of water. The interesting thing is that phrase also appears in the morning liturgy, you know, as we're waking up and we're giving thanks for the day, and we're you know, praising the, you know, praising Creator and all of this. There's a moment where in our prayers we bless God. In the Jewish tradition, we bless God a lot. You know, we don't bless things, we bless God who brought these things. So, you know, it's said that we're the people who give thanks, right? That's part of our job. But this phrase that we say in the morning, Elohai neshama shenatata bi taharahi. You hear that taharahi? It's there again. It's saying, my God, the soul that you gave to me is pure. Well, when I do that, I don't just say it once. I say taharahi, 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 and each time I raise my hands a little bit higher, and I imagine that it's my body being held by my circle of friends who we've been doing, you know, we call each other sisters. We've been doing this for decades together. And I imagine that that's my body there, that they're praying over. And that's how when I start my day like that, it wakes me up and it makes me remember how precious every moment is. And to, you know, to not waste this moment that you and I, through this miraculous thing, are looking into one another's eyes from across time and space, you know, that we have that gift. So the stories that I want to tell you, I want to frame in that way by just, you know, really recognizing the preciousness of everything that we have, and how we have these traditions that in one way or another wake us up to the preciousness of the moment and the possibilities. So going back a little bit there, you know, when I got to that time that I started regaining full capacity, and as I said, one of the things that really told me that I had my body back was that I could be one of those people picking up that body. And I'll say, you know, well, right now we're in COVID and that's a different reality, but every time I do one of those ceremonies, which I am typically the leader now of the team that's working together doing that ceremony, there inevitably is a moment when we need to adjust the body on the table for some reason. And that's my moment. You know, I have really sort of claimed that moment where I get that opportunity to pick that dead body, let's say it, up in my arms and feel it and imagine there was a moment that was a newborn baby. And someone had the opportunity to lift that tiny baby in their arm for the first time. And I have the privilege of doing it for the last time. And wow, if you want to be up close and personal with the miraculous, it's that. It's that.
Well, I love that you're sharing about this because, you know, you and I have spoken, and of course, everyone kind of recognizes, I think, that we put death somewhere else. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want, in the modern world that I live in, we don't want to talk about it. We don't, you know, when someone passes, we, you know, give that away and someone else takes care of that. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the magnificence and the beauty of being involved in that process, which I think is part of our humanness that we have lost.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting. Did you notice there was that moment when you said when someone passes rather than when someone dies, right? Well, this is an interesting conversation that goes on in my world because there are those people who say, oh, if you see that person passes, that's a euphemism. Let's get real about this. That person died. Well, okay, yeah, I don't disagree with that. But I also like to say that, you know, we think of death so often, we think of it as being a failure, you know, like doctors would think when their patient dies that they somehow have failed, or people think of death as being a punishment. It's like it's the worst thing that could happen to them, right? But and we want to be honest about the fact that that person died. Let's get real. But I say, hey, wait a minute. Let's change our vernacular just a little bit and say when we say a person passes, we're saying they didn't flunk. They get to move on.
Mm-hmm.
There's more to that. So there's the, yeah, let's get real about the fact that so-and-so died and not go into magical thinking that, you know, because as you probably have experienced yourself, when somebody we love very much dies, we go through that thing of picking up the phone and realizing, oh no, I can't call them this way. I mean, when somebody dies, I don't take them out of my contacts. I just remove their phone number because I'm going, I don't need that anymore. But that doesn't take them out of my contact list. You know, I just have to learn new tools for communicating with them. But um, I'm not going to be so rude as to say that they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if we learn how, we listen, we feel them. And as a matter of fact, based on that, there's another poem that I would like to share with you about someone who I loved very much, who I held in my arms when he died. My beloved, I held him tightly in my arms as he coiled and burst forth like a summer seed into the fullness of his fruit. I will tell you, he did not die. He lifted like a martial artist from his body, great master of the art of soul. He did not die, I can tell you, because he did not die in my arms. He flew right through me when he passed.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to change our vernacular in all sorts of ways. In fact, I recently have started thinking, not so much talking about, but thinking about that when someone dies, when they pass, they don't leave behind a dead body. They leave behind a spent body,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And part of why I say that is because of an experience that I had basically, well, it was last year and really sort of culminating when I went to the Bioneers Conference last year. So you've probably heard about this brilliant innovator named Katrina Spade, who has developed this process called Recompose, which is basically the composting of human bodies instead of burying or you know, embalming or incinerating or whatever. Anyway, it's this composting process, which is now legal in the state of Washington. and they're just beginning to do it. I think in fact that the first lineup of bodies are now in their 30-day process. So let me tell you a little bit about this, which is a blow mind in itself. But then when you find out how it works, then okay, step back, because you will really be blow-minded. Recompose takes one human body. Here's the recipe: one human body, alfalfa, wood chips, and straw. And all of that goes into a vessel, which is basically, if you think like a 55-gallon drum laid down, kind of only, you know, the size for one human body, as sort of a capsule. For 30 days, it's in there in an environmentally optimized set of circumstances. So, right, not too much moisture, but not too dry, and just the right temperature and all that. But, you know, we're not talking about mushroom suits or injecting any, we're talking about just this alfalfa, wood chips, and straw for 30 days in this cradle that rocks ever so gently one way, right? And there's a gentle turning that happens inside as well. And what you get after that 30 days is about a cubic meter of compost, which on a DNA level is no longer human.
Wow.
Let's just let that sink in for a moment. In 30 days. What we're doing is basically accelerating the natural process. Right? So, and that's now legal in this in the state of Washington. They've got their facility up and running. It's working on legalization in several other states. I think it would have been legalized in California this year if it hadn't been for COVID and just the fact that everybody's attention had to go elsewhere. We're not spending money on anything that we don't need to right now. Question?
Well, I wanted to, may I ask something here? Because
please.
I had one of my, I don't know how to say it. Anyway, something that bothers me about the way that we bury our dead and let bodies go into the world is that we often put them in these places that literally keep them, you know, in a casket that in a sense is meant to keep them from returning to the earth, which is very strange to me because the Mother Earth gave us all of this. And it can go back and just be a part of that wonderful process. And for some reason, that's been odd for us. So what I thought, rather than that, the only other choice I knew was to be cremated. And when we spoke before, and I know down the line you will talk about this, when we spoke before, you talked to me about how unecological, unhealthy, you know, how bad for everything in general, including the earth, that process is. So it's really fascinating to me to hear about this kind of a process that accelerates what would be a natural process of offering ourselves back to the Great Mother, back to the, you know, from dust to dust, to going back into and offering ourselves to the land. And I want to tell a little story here. I had to put down on a dog of mine. She was so badly injured she couldn't survive. And when that process was going, I said, you know what, darling? I said, you know, you love to chase coyotes, don't you? I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take you out onto the high hills, an absolute beautiful place, and I'm going to leave you there, and you're going to become a coyote. The coyotes will come and take you into themselves, and you will run absolutely radiant across the land and be wild and free. You will become a coyote. And so anyway, that was really inspirational for me. But that sense that we give back and become a part of everything we're already a part of, only in this rich and more exquisite way. So thank you for sharing that. I'm very interested in that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's stick a bookmark there and do a little jump then. So imagine having this beautiful piece of land that you really want to preserve. I mean, it's got a lot of natural beauty. It maybe has some challenges because part of it was turned into ranch land and it got overgrazed, or it was farmland that was using what have been until very recently the really accepted means of agriculture, using chemicals and tilling the soil and all of that sort of thing. And the land wants to be brought back to how it used to be, right? As a matter of fact, let's go one step further. Let me take you over to England. Let me take you over to England, to the county of Surrey, to this valley called Clarendon. There was a farm in Clarendon, 32 acres, went fallow. They weren't farming it anymore. I don't know why. And somebody bought that land and they turned it into a natural burial ground.
Hmm.
And when a body is brought there to be buried, it's shrouded. It's maybe put into a container, but that would be like a willow basket, or very like pine, softwood that breaks down very readily.
And shrouding, tell me what you mean. Is shrouding wrapping?
That's right. Yeah, wrapping in fabric. Wrapping it, and which would need to be, like not polyester, mind you. No polyester. I'm talking about hemp or cotton or linen or natural fiber. Everything natural, right? No, you can't wear your favorite jacket with a zipper on it. It's got to be all completely natural. What these folks who bought this fallow farmland in Clarendon did, and they call it Clarendon Wood because there are a bunch of trees planted there now also. And, I'm not very tall, well, neither are they, but they'll grow up to be big, beautiful trees. My partner and I visited that place when it was 7 years into its process. Now, if you look at a map of the place, of the burials there, it looks like a parking lot, one after another. But when you go and ramble around in the place, you feel like you're in this beautiful meadow with young trees starting to grow up. They created a planting schedule for that spot, that the only plants that were allowed there, the only vegetation that was allowed, was originally from that little valley there, not the whole county of Surrey, just Clarendon. And you walk around in there, and it's kind of amusing. It looks a little bit like a catalog right now. It's like, well, you got 6 of those and 12 of those and a bunch of those interspersed. And they come by in late summer and they mow the tall grasses and all of that. But it is the most beautiful place. And the people who have been living in that valley for a long time say they're seeing critters they haven't seen in forever. They're restoring the natural grid there. They're inviting back the natural, the animals that should be there. And underneath the ground, what you're getting is all of those human bodies doing what, I got to say, I have a little bit of a giggle here. What's the name of this conversation that you've been putting on?
Returning to Earth.
And?
Becoming fully human.
Okay, well, if we just say returning to Earth fully human, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. And that's happening in the United States now. That's happening in North America. It's called conservation burial. And notice which word comes first. It's first and foremost about conservation of land. And part of how that happens is by turning it into a burial ground and by giving these human bodies back in a natural way. It's not what I refer to as embalming, case and vault, where you've got a concrete vault in the ground, and inside of that you got a big fancy metal or hardwood casket, and inside of that you've got a body that's been, I'm not going to say pickled, that's been embalmed in a way that's not like what the Egyptians did. What it does is it keeps it looking healthy long enough for people to come and pay their final respects, and but it's not going to turn into anything the earth would use if the earth could even get to it, right? What we're talking about doing, what natural burial is about, and this is why I'm such a strong advocate of working with the Green Burial Council, is exactly what they're talking about doing, exactly what we are teaching about doing. I just recently went through a couple week-long conference. It was very much like this one, where you had somebody every day over Zoom. You can go on their website, and just like what you're doing here, you can go and sign up and see recordings of all of these different conversations of people that are working in this natural burial movement, and understand. In fact, right now I'm working on developing a curriculum for teaching people how to do this. It's one of the other projects I've got going on. But I want to jump back over to Recompose, and to when I started learning about this composting project. I'm going like, I want to be able to talk about this like an advocate. I want to be an advocate for that. That means I need to understand it. And all of a sudden, the old hippie who lives at the end of the road and tries not to go to town much is like, I'm learning about biochemistry on a level I never imagined possible, and finding out what goes on in the human body. I always thought it was like I had this horse and rider relationship with my body, right? Body's the horse, I'm the rider. And, and what I learned is that it's more like I'm the queen of the realm, or even bigger than that. It's like I am the one who is running this little universe that I'm walking around in. And the way I started thinking, well, the first thing that happened was I got this picture of myself as being like, you think of the old movies where there's down in the hull of the ship, there are all the people pulling the oars, and there's the mean old taskmaster pounding on the drum going, stroke, stroke, stroke. And I realized I was doing that. And all these little guys that live in my body are going, is she ever going to feed us? Is she ever going to let us rest? Is she ever going to, and I'm just going, come on, more, 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 you're not keeping up with me. And all of a sudden I realized there's a whole lot more going on in here than me. And I started thinking about my gut, I started learning about my gut microbiome, and thinking about them as them. There are all these other living beings who are hanging out in this body besides me. I'm running the place, but they live here too. And as a matter of fact, they're like the stage crew, and I'm the one who's out on stage. But what happens when the play is over? What does the stage crew do? It breaks the set. And as soon as the human being as soon as the soul who's living in here passes on, the stage crew turns their attention to breaking this down and giving it back to the earth. And all those things that you were talking about are ways of pretending that that's not going to happen, trying to keep it from happening, even just like keeping a body on ice for a few days so people can come and visit, which is a much more respectful way of doing things. And then after people have had the opportunity to say goodbye, or to say hello, or to sit and read poetry and let it sink into our animal body that this person has died, let it become real, then to wrap them up in simple garments, shroud them, maybe put them into a box, even a cardboard container, or a beautiful basket, or even, you know, like a woven tray that the shrouded body lays on, and carry it into the burial ground, maybe even have the privilege of digging the hole, lower that body into the ground. Maybe even before you lower that, there's this new art form that's starting to happen of people doing mandalas with flowers and things like that in the bottom of the grave before lowering the body into the grave, and covering it with soil that has been very carefully taken out so that what belongs on top goes over here and the next layer down goes over there, and burying in the 2 to 4 foot zone where the microbial action happens, right? And tucking that body back into the earth the way it belongs. We're doing this now. And we can do more of it. And part of why I'm so involved now in building, I mean, literally, I'm just in the process of fundraising to make it possible for me to take the time to design the curriculum to teach people how to be cemeterians. Have you ever even heard that word? People, right, cemeterians, people who run cemeteries, who know how to manage the earth in a good way, who know, you know, find the right kind of soil, find the right kind of setting, find a beautiful setting that deserves to be preserved, and become a place that the community can come and ramble and pick flowers to lay on the graves of the person that they themselves buried there, and it becomes holy ground for that community again, instead of, oh, that, you know, fallow farm back there that's growing all kinds of stuff that you know, when it dries and the wind blows, it takes it all over the place and, you know, turns into weeds. You know, resacralizing the ground, literally resacralizing the ground by giving our beloved dead back to it in a way that is nurturing for the land. Imagine this. Just in the United States, about 2.8 million people die every year. 2.8 million people every year die in the United States, right? We're now at the point where 58% of them on an average, I mean, some places it's much higher, some places it's much lower, but on an average, 58% of them are ending up with a cremation. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on cremation because you can do the research and find out all the reasons why. But basically what we do is we're saying that after someone dies, we're demanding yet more from the earth in terms of the energy that it takes to cremate that body and turn it into something that the earth cannot use. I mean, it's not even as useful as rocks that are going to break down and return minerals to the soil. You know, all the good is being cooked out of it. Whereas we could be taking those bodies and putting them back into the earth as living matrix. Question.
Are there chemicals and things involved as well? What you say, it's literally taken down where it's not anything very useful, but are there also chemicals and things and chemicals that go into the air around all of this?
Yeah. There's well, for starters, just the energy that it takes to do one cremation, and there's not one simple answer to that, because there are a lot of different crematoria, some of them older, some of them newer, some of the, you know, so state of the art, you know, but there's for one thing, and I forget the percentage now, but a lot of the mercury that is up there in the sky where it doesn't belong comes from mercury amalgam fillings that have been cremated and released that mercury up into the atmosphere.
Really?
Yes, yeah. So let's just take two things and then move on. Imagine taking an incandescent light bulb, one of the, not one of the, nice ones that we got now, but the old fashioned incandescent light bulb, and turning it on and leaving it on for 10 years and releasing a bunch of mercury into the atmosphere, not to mention the heat that comes out of a crematorium. But anyway, I want to get into other things during this time. So, but yeah, go ahead with that. In your own thinking, in your own research, and in fact, I'd be very happy to send you some links and stuff on this. And in fact, I can tell you a lot of what you're looking for, you can find on the Green Burial Council website. That's an excellent place to go. Green Burial Council, they've got all, as a matter of fact, I'll just say this book, Changing Landscapes, which is edited by Lee Webster. This is a Green Burial Council publication, and this whole section of the book are PDFs that you can download off of their website.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, you can get a lot of that information right there. Just absolutely amazing. Some of it very detailed, very scientific. So that was a lot. So let's take a deep breath and let me read you another poem, because this is where I'd rather go. There was a time when I said, I am a sword beaten into plowshare. But now, even that is not a satisfactory image. I do not want to do unto the earth the violence of a blade gouging my agenda into a landscape of living soil, but instead to find my way with careful pitchfork, trowel, and fingers, wafting the pollen of my prayers across the landscape. Let not so much as a humble earthworm be harmed by my mindless hacking away. I want to be at peace with where things are, the dirt, compost, and mulch, and let it be as nature herself lets it be, working with what is instead of forcing what I want upon the divine plan. It is time now to study the intricate matrix of plants, soil, and creatures, and to find my way among them, introducing food crops and ornamentals that work in harmony and partnership with what nature has intended, learning the power of flow instead of domination, channeling life force instead of harnessing it, a mill wheel turning by the impetus of a passing stream instead of an unforgiving paddle wheel pushing relentlessly onward while somewhere in the bowels of a ship, sweaty laborers shovel fuel stolen from the flanks of the Earth Mother into a gaping furnace, leaving a trail of ashen tears across the sky. Let the fire that warms my soul be fueled by gathered windfall as I gentle my way through my days, nibbling mature fruit and foliage from the generosity of harvest gathered with my own hands, and celebrate a renewed understanding of what it means to live from hand to mouth. Taste the first sun-warmed plums of summer and gratefully pick the leaves from a kale plant who has wintered over twice now without any help from me and still continues to offer up her food for love.
Thank you. I love that you're sharing these poems, and they're so beautiful.
Well, and I got to say, there's a lot of Masanobu Fukuoka in that. That book we were talking about before we logged on here, the One Straw Revolution, which is just an amazing book. And in fact, I want to share with you. So there was I'll give you a couple quotes here on this one, the one that I shared with you before we logged on. and another one that I think they go beautifully together. This is from the chapter, Limits of the Scientific Method. Before researchers become researchers, they should become philosophers. They should consider what the human goal is, what it is that humanity should create.
Hmm.
And this other one, I know you're going to love this one. I do not particularly like the word work. Human beings are the only animals who have to work. And I think this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. Other animals make their livings by living, but people work like crazy, thinking that they have to in order to stay alive. The bigger the job, the greater the challenge, the more wonderful they think it is. It would be good to give up that way of thinking and live an easy, comfortable life with plenty of free time. I think that the way animals live in the tropics, stepping outside in the morning and evening to see if there is something to eat, and taking a long nap in the afternoon, must be a wonderful life. I remember one summer, I was being a camp host at Yosemite Creek Campground. And in fact, you remember that summer I was driving around in a VW pop top and living here and there, and I had all my stuff, and I felt like I was being so efficient that I had everything that I need in that one little space. And but a lot of schlepping back and forth and packing and unpacking and packing and unpacking, and eat a little, pack a little, hike a little, pack a little. And then I saw this lizard on a rock. No backpack, no house, no nothing. Doing just fine. Big, fat, buff lizard. And I felt so silly. I just felt so silly.
Well, golly, this has been so wonderful. I think we're coming close to the end of our time, and I wondered if you have some, some things you want to add in here before we say goodbye.
Yeah, I do. I do. Thank you. I want to go back to that idea of that we have this gut microbiome. Each one of us has this little. We're each one of us is a walking ecosystem, and whatever we choose to eat has a profound impact on the entire village. This entire ecosystem. So let's take it a step further and think about the entire planet. Think about the biosphere. So the biosphere is this, it's almost like a halo, only it goes down into the earth, right? And it basically goes down to the bottom of the ocean and up through the land and out into the sky, but not very far, right? And that's where we live, the biosphere. And here we go. It's basically 12 miles from the bottom to the top. 12 miles. That's already kind of scary when you think about how small it is. This living, our living space, right? Mm-hmm. This is where we get to live, but we don't get to live in those whole 12 miles, because if you go way up there or you go way down there, it's not really very habitable. What we have is basically less than 7 kilometers, right? It's like 6.5 kilometers, which is a little over 4 miles. How long would it take you to walk 4 miles, Brooke?
Less than an hour.
Let that sink in. That's how tender, how fragile, how precious the space that we have to live in on this planet is. And if we think then of just the soil, right? Out of that little bit of space that we've got there, the soil is like the gut microbiome of the planet. And what we feed that determines what goes up, what goes down. That's what we're living in, right? We think of ourselves, a lot of science fiction talks about us as being carbon-based life forms, right? And a lot of that carbon is ending up there where it doesn't belong. And what we need to do with our prayers and I'm talking about our lives lived as a prayer. What we need to be doing is calling carbon home. And one of the ways that we can do that is by burying our dead in a sacred manner, by returning to Earth fully human. Not some processed piece of stuff that the Earth Mother cannot digest, cannot be fed by. We need to nurture nature. That simply. We need to call carbon home. We need to give our bodies back to the earth in a sacred manner. We need to educate ourselves, and instead of pretending that death isn't going to happen, to look ahead to it and say, am I going to graduate when I pass? Have I lived in a good way that is good for the earth? Am I going to, when I exit this stage, am I going to give it back to the earth in a way that says thank you to her, and instead of saying I want more and I will give you less in exchange? That's what we're doing by our conventional burial practices and by cremations. And we really need to get that. We need to go on the Green Burial Council website and educate ourselves, and to show up for caring for our own dead in a sacred manner. There is nothing in the world that will affect you as strongly as picking up the body of someone you have loved and wash it and pray over it and sit with it and love it. After I have done that, I come home and I am in such a profound state of love that I just have to be quiet for a while. I just have to sit and think and look. Life is sacred, and so is death, because death is a beginning. Death is a beginning of what comes next, not just for our souls, but also for our bodies. These are sacred objects, and we need to give them back to the earth in a way that reflects that.
Ollie, thank you so much. I know that we're all going to have a lot of contemplation and thoughts about this, and I do hope that people look up more and follow this up, because I think we've been awakened to how profoundly important it is, not only for, in a sense, our own psyche and soul, but for this sweet earth that we're wanting to take care of and steward in a whole different way than we have been. So thank you so much for your stewardship and your beautiful offering to us. It's been most unusual, and I think really profoundly useful, because it is about life and the richness of life, as well as the sacredness of death. So thank you so much, old friend. Thank you for your work, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you, old friend. Love you.
All righty.